Hello and welcome to Salt and Light television coverage of Pope Francis's Apostolic voyage to Canada. I'm Matthew Harrison here with you today as we begin the second leg of the Holy Father's tour to Canada, where we enter into Quebec City. And joining me for our first event in Quebec City is Francis Denis. He is our Salt and Light French host for the Holy Father's visit here to Canada. Francis, welcome.
Good to be with you, Matthew.
So we just wrapped up 2 very full days, and 2.5 days if you count the arrival to the airport, but some very, I would say, intense and beautiful moments over the course of Monday and Tuesday. Of course, we had the visit to Musquecheese, as well as the Sacred Heart Church visit, and then yesterday the big Commonwealth Stadium open-air Mass. And then we concluded the day and the Holy Father's time in Edmonton at Lac Ste. Now, since that was the last event yesterday, I'd like to take a couple of moments just to talk a little bit about Lac Ste. And what a beautiful event that was. It was rich with so many different images of the Holy Father arriving to the pilgrimage site and then going to the water and blessing the water, and then his address to people. It was really quite a magnificent moment. Was there anything that stood out in particular about that you saw, Francis?
What stood out for me is the continuum. There was a logic between all the events that happened in Edmonton, in Alberta. And one is, I would say, you had the forgiveness that happened. That was very specific, very important, and how to face history and its dark sides. But I think afterwards, he really focused on the transmission, how this past, good and evil, can be transformed and faced for the future. And I think he really focused on a figure that is really important, and he put like a spotlight on the culture of Indigenous people by focusing on grandparents, and especially the kukum or the nukum that has the Indigenous languages for the grandmother. And the grandmother, for Pope Francis and his homilies, I think he really focused on how she is an element, a key element to transmit not only language, culture, but also values and the Christian faith, basically. So, and he also talked about how this importance that the Indigenous people put on the grandparents, how it reminds his own grandmother, and how and he shared with the people gathered how his own grandmother was the one who brought the faith into his life, and he became the Pope. So basically, you see how key is this element of transmission and the role and the centrality of the role of the grandparents.
Yeah, it was a very beautiful moment, and certainly the importance of family bonds was echoed throughout a number of the Holy Father's homilies yesterday. And we just saw images of the Holy Father at Lac Ste. Where he blessed the water, and he made an interesting comparison to the Sea of Galilee, where Christ acted in so many different ways with calling the apostles, preaching the Beatitudes, and so on and so forth. And he also talked about Lac Ste. As a place that draws people together, Indigenous or non-Indigenous, and he talked about fraternity and fellowship, and that coming together of different cultures, and that at events or pilgrimages like at St. Anne, you have an opportunity to start afresh together. And to your point off the top, Francis, that really is one of those themes where the Holy Father is talking about, we've had the moment of asking for forgiveness. Now it's time to walk together. Now it's time to move forward together. So I thought that was wonderfully emphasized in his homily, particularly in that address at Lac Ste. Anne.
Yeah, exactly. And I think and it's my interpretation, but I think it was also in the symbolism, because he wore a stole of Métis people with the Cinceau Fléché also, because the French Canadian use it as a Cinceau Fléché. But the Métis stole, who are the Métis in a certain way? They were a population and a culture, proper culture, that was brought out of the marriage between the Europeans and the Indigenous people. So I think to wear that and to show our cultural exchange, and how, in a certain way, Métis is something that we all should be looking for, how to exchange, how to create a new culture based on dialogue and cultural exchanges, and those values that he shared with us during all the speeches that he expressed during his stay in Edmonton.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now the Holy Father, of course, it was the feast of St. Anne and St. Joachim, and so a very special moment to be at Lac St. Anne on the feast of St. Anne. And he did speak, as you mentioned, about grandmothers. He spoke about our Blessed Mother. He spoke about Our Lady of Guadalupe. But he also, at the shrine itself, there was a sculpture, and it happened towards the end of the program. And some viewers may not have noticed it, but there was a blessing for a sculpture that's been left there. It was a gift by Pope Francis to the community, to the Indigenous people, to the shrine. And it was done by a Canadian sculptor, Timothy Schmaltz. And we have a little bit of information on this sculpture, which is Mary, Undoer of Knots. So let's learn a little bit more from the artist himself about this special gift from Pope Francis.
Mary Undoer of Knots, to me, is one of the most appropriate sculptures for this papal visit. And what I find absolutely fantastic is that it is apparently Pope Francis's favorite devotion of Mary. And so his favorite devotion of Mary fits perfect with, I believe, one of his most important visits to another country. The sculpture represents this so artistically, so poetically, because there you have Mary untying a knot that's surrounding the world. And I thought, this is exactly what Pope Francis is doing. It really, I think, touches this historical visit so perfectly, so clearly. If you notice the sculpture of Mary too, she's not your cookies and cream Mary. She's not smiling. She's intent. She has a knitted brow. She's really seriously trying to fix the problems of the world. And I see that same expression on Pope Francis's face. And I see that same spirit. And so to have this sculpture as a permanent installation of this historical visit, hopefully when people see the sculpture, they will see that spirit, that hope, and that care about fixing the problems of the world. I think one of the most powerful things is the face of Mary herself. I don't want her necessarily to be smiling and being at peace. And I think that people will see that when they have their own problems, their own knots that they have to untie. When they come and see Mary looking a lot like they do, the sculpture will really mean more to them. And so when I worked on the piece, I fell in love with the devotion. I fell in love with the idea of having a sculpture of Mary that is very unique and very important today. There are so many problems in the world today. And to have a representation of Mary that doesn't try to hide them, but brings them out right in front and center, and is dealing with them and is trying to fix them. You look at Pope Francis now. He's not at the best of his health. It's hard for him to move and to confront and be honest about imperfections and sins of the past. He's showing the world how to do that. And if he can do it at his age, at his difficulties, he's showing us all that we can do. And hopefully the sculpture will be reflective of that, looking at the problems, looking at those knots face on and untying them. And because it's Mary, and because Pope Francis has such an attachment for Mary, it's the best portrait of Pope Francis that we could place here as a commemoration of his visit. I don't think you can get any more Catholic than Mary, and Mary is at the center of it. When Pope Francis comes here, he acknowledges the sins, but he's still proud of being Catholic. And I think that needed to be part of the equation to understand, and for that apology to be authentic. That sculpture left behind will be here for centuries, will be a celebration of Mary, but not eclipsing any of the problems of the Catholic Church or of the world. I'm just happy we have a Pope that at his age is willing to fly right across the world to try to untie one of these problems.
What a special gift from Pope Francis to the Lac Ste shrine in Alberta, that beautiful statue of Mary, Undoer of Knots. As the artist Timothy Schmaltz said, one of the Holy Father's favorite devotions to Our Lady under the title of Mary, Undoer of Knots. So it was a beautiful way to certainly conclude the Holy Father's leg of his journey in Edmonton with that event in Lac Ste. And of course the open air mass earlier in the day on Tuesday. And now we shift our focus to Quebec City, where the Holy Father arrived earlier today. And Francis, what are your thoughts on this leg of the journey? He's going to be in Quebec City now for about a day and a half. What can we expect? And maybe how will it be different from the visit to Edmonton, or will it be different at all?
Well, first of all, for me, it's a really important moment because I'm from Quebec City, actually, and hopefully we will be able to see the Pope going into the streets where I grew up. So hopefully for me, actually, it's a very important. So I think it's really a part of the journey. Of course, he wanted to go to Edmonton because the major part of the population of Indigenous people is there, obviously. Also, it's in English part of Canada. I think it's really important as well. I think one of the key elements of this papal trip and his entire pontificate is to create a culture of encounter. So I think it was really important for him to not only go into English Canada and to meet all the Indigenous people, but also meet the Quebec culture, meet the Quebec Indigenous people as well, and the Francophone in general. So I think what we can expect is a Pope who's going to address all these issues, face history. Quebec City is the oldest city in North America, if we makes an exception of Florida, the Spanish colonies. It's a place where if we look back into history, it's a place where, let's say that the encounter between culture not necessarily happened in the best way, if we can say. We remember the plains of Abraham, the place where he's going to go today, is the place where the English conquered this part of North America to the French. That's the place where the two generals, Wolfe and Montcalm, died on the battlefield. So I think it's ended the War of 7 Years. So. And then after we know the history between French, English, and Indigenous people, how did they evolve together, how they made history all together with a beautiful sequence of history, let's say, at certain point, and sometimes darker part of history. So I think the Pope being there today, I think he's going to, he's planning to talk to the civil authorities, so the federal government, the provincial government, all the Indigenous people also from Quebec, a lot of the delegations from all over the province are going to be there. I think he's going to continue into some speeches and talk about those key points of building a new culture of encounter. And I think being in the plain of Abraham today will be really symbolic, let's say, and how can we continue and to reflect and to pray as Catholics also to create this culture of encounter in our country.
Yeah, I think that's key. That really has been part of this visit. Is if anyone's been joining us for the last few days, that you've seen over and over these individual encounters that the Holy Father has with people, and certainly I would imagine that this will continue over the course of this the Quebec City leg of the visit. Now, our own Jen Kopsake, who is our Vatican Bureau Chief, she was traveling along in the papal motorcade, and she told us that the streets are lined with people very excited to welcome the Holy Father. We're just seeing some footage that Jen sent us from the bus, so that's them entering the Citadel. But
no, actually, that's the entering the old city, the old part. It's La Porte Saint-Louis, if I remember it correctly. I think it's what separates. Like you had the gate. It was a military city for hundreds of years. You can see the French architecture mixing with the English architecture. I think it's really and this part where the bus of Jen just enter is recognized by UNESCO as a site of the patrimonial, worldly patrimonial site. So I think it's really, for me, it's really important that I see those places. I know them very well. Yeah, so I think the Pope Francis is going in that historical part of the city, and it's important to know a little bit about the geography of the old part of the city, and you have a military base. Basically, that's the Citadel, and that's where Pope Francis is going to address all the political element. The Governor General also going to present a speech today.
That's a good point, actually, Francis. Much like when he arrived in Edmonton, where there was that kind of head of state moment where the Holy Father had that photo op with the Prime Minister and with several Indigenous leaders and other government officials at the Edmonton International Airport, as he does fulfill that role as the head of Vatican City State. This will be similar. He'll be meeting with. He'll actually have a meeting with the Prime Minister. I think it's a 20 to 30 minute meeting. There'll be a meeting with the Governor General. Now, from what we understand, the Holy Father is going to give an address. The Governor General is going to give an address. And we've also been told that the Prime Minister now will also be giving an address. That's something that's been added kind of late in the game, so to speak. So we'll see how that plays out. It's sometimes some things come to fruition, sometimes they don't. So just go with the flow and see how that goes. But either way, it is that kind of official visit, and then the Holy Father does have an opportunity to have those private meetings. Of course, they won't be broadcast, but he'll be meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau. He'll be meeting with the Governor General Mary Simon. And no doubt talking about some of the experiences and things that have been happening over the last few days. The Prime Minister was in Musqueam. He was, I believe, he was certainly at the airport. I don't think he was in Edmonton though for the Commonwealth Stadium Mass, but he was there for the first day. So they have had an opportunity to have a bit of an encounter, but I think this will be a bit more of a longer opportunity for the two to have a conversation. But it's interesting you mentioned entering into Quebec City and the history there, and anyone who visits the city, it's stunning. It really is quite beautiful, and it's been a few years since I've had the opportunity to be there, and I even remember as part of Salt and Light Television covering the International Eucharistic Congress in 2008. And the Plains of Abraham, where people gathered for the concluding Mass.
A rainy concluding Mass.
That's right. Yes, it was a bit wet. I guess when there's anything major like that, whether it's a World Youth Day or an International Eucharistic Congress, there has to be a bit of rain.
The Prime Minister at that time of Quebec, Jean Charest, I remember him saying, we've all been baptized a second time today.
Exactly. A little bit of cleansing from the Holy Spirit, I suppose. So, and actually, on the Plains of Abraham, prior to the Holy Father arriving to the Citadel, there's been programming throughout the day. There's been a variety of different celebrations. I think it started earlier, maybe around noon, and it will continue throughout the day. So certainly it's not just one moment, it's definitely a celebration. As we saw the streets lined with people seem very excited to welcome the Holy Father.
Mm. And if I can stress that one more time, I think it's really an important location to stress the importance of being inspired by the past to face today's challenges. Mm-hmm. And I think we can see the result through the beauty of that city, particular city, because there was, like we say, it was founded in 1608, and then you had the conquest in 1760. and 63 and until 74 with the Act of Paris. Anyway, without going into all the steps of the history, I think it's important that to show that this city, how it was built, all the different element of different era are present. Like I said, the French with the beginning of New France, the Nouvelle France, and then the English who brought a little bit of their own touch to the development. When we arrived in the 20th century and all that modernity and this new way of building cities, there was a challenge at some point to maybe erase the past, erase the architecture inherited from the past, and there was a lot of politicians from which we can underline Frederick Hamilton Temple, like with Lord Dufferin, who was the Governor General in 1872 to 1878. He was the one who really stressed and worked hard to preserve all the fortification that we just saw, for instance, with the Porte Saint-Louis. And I think we see the Pope Mobile arriving at the Citadel at the moment.
So this would be the Citadel proper then, is that correct, Francis, or the Holy Father? The entourage coming with many of the church officials who were traveling with him in Edmonton have continued on, of course, Cardinals Ouellet, Cardinal Cherney, both traveling from Rome, Cardinal Lacroix, this is his home seat. Cardinal Collins.
Cardinal Ouellet, who was the Archbishop of Quebec for about 8 years as well. So
that's right, and Cardinal Ouellet brought to Rome to head the congregation of bishops. That was by Pope Benedict, I think around maybe 2010 it might have been. I'm not sure. So he's been in Rome some time, but it's really. I see this as a continuation, not only of the personnel, but a continuation of the themes. And Francis, you've been talking a lot about the history, and what a rich Catholic history in Quebec. The province as a whole, I mean, you look at Quebec City, you look at Montreal, and everyone from Saint Bishop de Laval to Marie de Incarnation, Blessed Catherine de Saint Augustin, Dina Boulanger, like so many, like just person after person who is any saints are blessed. They seem to be from Quebec, at least certainly
in North America.
3/4 of them.
But you can look also at the map, and everything you see is saints. It's saint.
That's true.
Everywhere is like Saint Famille. All the villages basically are named before saints. One of the elements. At the Citadel itself, it's a military base, but it's not like a very modern military base. It's more for protocols. But it's still the seat of the Royal 22nd Regiment, who's have his seat there, which is the Francophone regiment is a royal. So the Queen Elizabeth II is the colonel and the chief of that regiment. The particular element happened, another historical element happened in the Citadel is the conference of 1943, where Winston Churchill, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and William Lyon Mackenzie King had a gathering there, and they talked about eventual solutions for how to end up the Second World War. So very important element happened there. So I think we're going to see also the Royal 22nd Regiment at the moment with their British Empire clothing.
And we just saw a moment ago the Governor General, Mary Simon, with her husband, Whit Fraser. They're waiting to welcome the Holy Father. The Holy Father arriving in that familiar Fiat, a Fiat 500X that he's been tootling around Canada in. So multiple dignitaries here from the Lieutenant Governor of Quebec, Michel Dion, to the Premier of Quebec, François Legault, the Mayor of Quebec City, Mayor of Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré. There's the Holy Father, flanked by Cardinal Lacroix. Interesting to note, the Holy Father, as we've mentioned a few times, Father Marcel Caron, who's been doing the interpretation for him, is part of the, oh, and there's the greeting with the Governor General. And Father Caron bends in to provide some translation. Father Caron and Cardinal Lacroix are part of the same order, confraternity, I guess you would say.
Particular Institute, Pius X.
Now the Holy Father being greeted by Prime Minister Trudeau.
It's the first time I've been seeing myself aerial images from the Citadel.
Hearing the anthems, and now we have the movement of the Holy Father. The Holy Father will be meeting with the Governor General, and there'll also be a meeting. The Governor General then, after that meeting, will meet with Cardinal Pietro Parolin, of course, familiar as the Secretary of State. He's traveling with the Holy Father. He'll be traveling with the Holy Father in any of his apostolic voyages. Holy Father inspecting the regiment. Again, much like Edmonton with the first day of that visit, it's a bit more of the political aspect of the visit as opposed to the pastoral aspect. Though as part of the Holy Father's visit here, I'm sure some of the conversations behind closed doors will involve areas of interest for the Vatican City State and for the Holy Father. As well, he will be providing a public address, as will the Governor General. And the Governor General's residence is, of course, at the Citadel. Now, our viewers who are watching us live may have noticed we did have a bit of a time change on this event. There was a delay of one of the planes coming out of Edmonton. The Holy Father's plane was on time. However, there was another plane with other dignitaries and some other organizers, and that was delayed. That was delayed by a couple of hours. So. We did end up having the event move. So now there's going to be a meeting for some time. That will be followed by the address. And then, of course, there's several events still to occur in Quebec City. This will be the only public event for today. But tomorrow it's going to be quite busy. In fact, the significant, I guess the second significant large open air mass that will take place. Well, I suppose it's not so much open air mass. Will be at Saint Anne de Beaupré, which of course is such an important pilgrimage site, much like Lac Ste, very important in the west. Saint Anne de Beaupré, certainly very important in the east. That beautiful shrine just outside Quebec City, is it not, Francis? Saint Anne de Beaupré?
Yeah, it's around, I would say, half an hour from the downtown. Saint Anne de Beaupré. Beaupré is the city where the sanctuary is. But we kind of, because of the importance of the sanctuary in a small village like that, it makes the name of the village is sometimes confused with the sanctuary, and on both ways. They are inseparable, let's say.
And there you go. So a little bit of insight information. Also on Thursday, in addition to Mass at the National Shrine, there will be Vespers with bishops, priests, deacons, consecrated persons, seminarians, and pastoral workers. And that will actually be at the Cathedral Basilica of Notre Dame in Quebec City. One of the many, well, if not the most stunning of the churches within Quebec City, the beautiful old churches. Certainly just quite a marvel to look at. It feels almost like, once stepping into the boundaries of the city, it's like being taken to Europe, and there's that history there, and certainly a tremendous amount of beauty in Catholic tradition and culture.
Yeah, and we can, if we are attentive enough, we can see elements and links between history, like the door we are seeing at the very moment. This structure is based on the Roman temples, which were incorporated into the British architecture that we see now. So from Rome to London to Quebec to Rome with the popes. For those who have been to Rome, a lot of churches have this architecture as a door.
What an interesting connection. And speaking of connections, here we have Pope Francis meeting with our Governor General. Let's try and listen in.
Well, you speak more than one language.
It's hard to understand.
Yes, our Governor General does only speak English, so...
And Inuktitut, which is another language that I suppose Pope Francis understands.
I did hear the mention of grandmothers, which is interesting, because of course that's been one of the themes, and you touched on that earlier, Francis, the importance of grandmothers, and Father Marcel Caron has taken a seat in between to help facilitate the conversation. Pope Francis is certainly much more comfortable speaking in Spanish. So I believe
Zoom in.
that's
Very interesting.
I believe that's our obligatory photo op. Of course, the press allowed into the meeting room for a few moments to get some photos, and then they'll have I believe a bit more of a private meeting. Now, I'm sure that some of the conversation we'll hear some references to in the remarks from both the Governor General and Pope Francis after their conversation. And again, the Vatican Secretary of State will also have a meeting with the Governor General after Pope Francis meets. From what I believe, there's a bit of what we'd say a flip-flop. So right now, Pope Francis is meeting with the Governor General, and then he'll meet with the Prime Minister, and I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that at this time the Prime Minister is meeting with Cardinal Parolin, who's the Secretary of State. So then, when the Governor General is done with Pope Francis, then the Governor General will meet with the Secretary of State. So covering off all our political bases, I suppose. And you did point out that our Governor General does speak Inuktitut. She is Indigenous, obviously, Inuit. The first Indigenous Governor General in Canadian history. And of course the Governor General being that representative of the Queen. Now, from what I understand, the address that the Holy Father will be providing, thus far we've had his addresses have very much been to the Indigenous communities, to residential school survivors, and then probably you could expand that more to Catholics in general, to Christians in general. But it's our understanding that the address that he will be providing shortly will be to all Canadians. So we'll see what he has to say. I have heard that there may be a reference to maple syrup, and that may seem like that's being said in jest, but I believe that there is a reference on. I'm curious to see how that is weaved into the conversation. So as I noted earlier, the Plains of Abraham have been active throughout the day. Activities began at just shortly after noon with a musical program that is featuring Indigenous and non-Indigenous artists, and picking up on the theme of the papal people visit. The theme of the event has been walking together, hope for reconciliation. And it is interesting to note that even that phrase itself draws together several of the Holy Father's themes of his remarks thus far, that walking together piece, as well of course the reconciliation aspect, and then hope very much on Tuesday. The theme of hope was running throughout his comments and his homily. So an activity or a gathering such as that on the Plains of Abraham earlier today, and ongoing too. It's to continue through into the evening. It's interesting because it is bringing together Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, and really that sense and that idea of walking together.
Interesting element is that the Vatican flag is exactly the same color as the Nunavut flag, which instead of the keys of St. Peter and the tiara has Ninukshuk in the middle.
That's right.
You can say some interesting fact about Quebec City. Today, according to the Statistic Canada, there's about 550,000 people living in Quebec City, which can reach, if you make the great area, about 1 million people. It's the capital of the province of Quebec, where you have the parliament as well. The Archdiocese of Quebec is also very old. It was instituted as a vicariate apostolate of the New France by Louis XIV in 1658, before becoming a diocese in 1674. Monsieur Laval, of course, was the first vicar and became the first bishop. And he became one of the first saints from
That's right.
of our country.
In fact, Pope Francis naming him a saint, just over the course of the fact that there's been such a long devotion to him, that he proclaimed Bishop de Laval, Francois de Laval, and Marie d'Incarnation as saints. And in fact, the Archdiocese of Quebec, I believe, was the first see to be established in the New World north of Mexico.
Yep. And it was a point in 1712 where the Archdiocese of Quebec was, the territory was almost all North America, at the exception of the British colony on the Atlantic shore and, how do you say, the Spanish colony in Florida. Was very, maybe a hard thing to do your pastoral visit without airplane, and you have to go from Quebec City down to the Mississippi.
I can't imagine. It's quite the area. It's certainly the missionaries had their job cut out to them, so to speak, cut out for them to visit their different priests and areas. And
we have stories of Monsieur Laval going to Montreal in canoe to make his visit to different parishes in La Prairie, for instance.
And it's interesting too. Just thinking of the comments that the Holy Father made yesterday, particularly about families, that Bishop de Laval had a strong devotion to the Holy Family. So that's, again, we see that ongoing connection. Certainly the Holy Father identifying, and rightly so, the importance of connecting families together. And in fact, it's interesting because in some of his remarks, it wasn't, it was framed, obviously, the horrific intergenerational trauma that the Indigenous peoples are suffering from the residential schools and the broken family bonds. But then also he spoke about, at Lac Ste, for instance, the importance of connecting families together when, there's so many distractions in the world. when people might be more focused on looking at their phone. And he had this particular line about do not abandon, and do not abandon people who may be sick. He hinted at euthanasia. Do not abandon people who are kind of lost in their cell phones, or people who might feel marginalized. And I guess that sense of loneliness that we hear so much about, and really the Holy Father trying to encourage people to connect together as families, either I guess you could say as blood relatives, or even just the closeness of friendship and the importance of supporting each other. Now, the Archbishop of Quebec, so in this case Cardinal Lacroix, also has the ceremonial title of Primate of Canada, and that was given to the Archbishop of Quebec by Pope Pius XII in 1956. And essentially, what that means is it's I guess it's more like a jurisdictional.
It's an
kind of
honorary title.
Right. Yeah.
Basically, it's because it was the first to be established. And also, but the fact of creating those honorary title makes the consistent in the approach of every pontiff, the pontificate, to show the importance of the continuity throughout history. And I think one of a lot of things that we take for granted can inspire us today as well to how to understand our life in that, and to be inspired by the cultural exchange that happened. For instance, the very name of Canada is from Canada, which is from the Huron Iroquois language, which is signify village, or and it was a name given in the language of Iroquois, Huron, but it was given at the same time by a European. So, and more the territory of that Canada got bigger and bigger and bigger to become the second biggest country in the world. So it is the same for Quebec. Quebec means where the river becomes very small, and it was a strategic area for military speaking.
And I guess that would be in reference to the St. Lawrence, then.
Yeah, exactly. The St. Lawrence River, just in front where you see the Frontenac Castle, that's where it becomes. So we see the Provincial of Quebec, Premier François Legault, and the Lieutenant General arriving with their staff.
That's right, the Lieutenant General, the Honorable Michel Doyon. I have to apologize now for my French pronunciations, Francis. I'm sorry.
I apologize for my English.
We'll be okay. We'll make it through. You can hear that music in the background. That's, again, the different programming that's occurring at the Plains of Abraham. And one thing I wanted to mention about this event that's been happening all through the afternoon and into the evening, this Walking Together Hope for Reconciliation event that's bringing together Indigenous and non-Indigenous artists, is that one of the highlights is going to be the arrival of Pomon Meshkanu marchers. So this is a group of marchers who have been traveling hundreds of kilometers to see the Pope's visit to the Plains of Abraham. And then there's a variety of other presentations and performances. But those marchers, they walked 275 kilometers, and they were expected to arrive at some point this afternoon. And the point of the march was to recognize the residential schools trauma, and to really help to raise awareness and to bring about healing and reconciliation. Also among the performers, and I'm not sure, that might be who we hear in the background now because the song sounds familiar, but Matt Maher, very popular Canadian Catholic artist who's from Newfoundland originally, but studied piano and lives in Nashville, Tennessee, and one of the top contemporary Christian artists at this time. But he's also part of this performance. 3 of his 9 albums have been on the Billboard Top 25 Christian Album charts. His repertoire includes spiritual pieces with a focus on community, and in fact, he's played for Pope Francis. Played for Pope Francis, I believe, in Brazil. He's played at another point. I'm not sure offhand, but he's certainly well familiar to large Catholic gatherings. Now, I understand that Julian Paparella, who is one of our associate producers here at Salt and Light Television. Julian is on the phone. Julian, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Julian, it's great to hear your voice. Matthew and Francis here in studio. Julian, you were on the ground in Edmonton, and now you're on the ground in Quebec City. So tell me how the trip has been going thus far.
I've got to say it's been a really powerful, very moving, emotional trip. It hasn't all been roses and sunshine, for sure, but a lot of people have been really touched by the fact that the Pope has made such an effort to come all the way here to Canada, and even to come really right into their communities, into these small little rural areas where the Indigenous are living around Edmonton, in places that are significant to them, in Musquatchis, where he delivered the apology on Monday morning, then later going to Lac Ste yesterday, of course the beautiful Mass at Commonwealth Stadium. It's really been a time for people to not only hear the Pope ask for forgiveness, but also to try, based on where they're at, to open themselves to be able to forgive. Because that's really the goal here. It's not just sort of a formal apology that has to be issued. This is about healing, this is about reconciliation, and that happens not only by asking for forgiveness, but by also forgiving.
Absolutely, Julian. And how has that message been received thus far? Certainly at Musquatchis, you had an opportunity to talk with some elders and talk with some in attendance, and we've been playing clips that you've been sending throughout the week. But how has that message been received? That message of forgiveness and then taking the next step forward.
I've got to say I've been really pleasantly surprised by how many people see this as a really good thing. Certainly, it opens wounds. It touches on traumas from people's past, traumas that have affected their families for generations. This is not easy. This is difficult for a lot of people. But I've been really encouraged and inspired by how people really want to move forward, how people want to forgive, and how they're really seizing this opportunity. Many of them are so grateful that Pope Francis has come, especially given his health. They really see this as a beautiful sign. They see that he's really trying as best as he can, doing as much as possible, and that it's for them, that he's really taking the time to be with them, to be close to them, to try and really make sure that they know how important this is to him and how important they are for the church. So I think overall, very well received. Certainly criticism, I think that's always going to be part of any kind of major public event like this, but by and large, people really expressing gratitude. One woman even said, I think very poignantly, I'm so glad that I am alive to see the Pope come to our land and apologize, because so many of my fellow residential school survivors are no longer here. They didn't make it till today to be able to experience this.
Yes, that's certainly a very powerful experience for people. I recall at I think it was Commonwealth Stadium, there was a woman in the congregation holding up a picture of what looked like might have been her mother or her grandmother, her kukum, And I think that people are really bringing with them the relatives who may have gone through this trauma, if they themselves have not also gone through it. Obviously in many cases some would have, or they're dealing with the intergenerational trauma that has come with residential schools. And it's interesting to listen to, and Francis and I have been talking about this, just the stressing of the importance of family by the Holy Father. And then we see so many people wanting that healing for their families and bringing pictures along, or really carrying their relatives in their hearts with them if relatives are unable to attend, if they've passed away or just unable to be there. So it's really a beautiful expression of the importance of family.
And I would say this is really at the heart of Indigenous culture and of Indigenous life. For them, they really see life as a web of relationships, something that I think in many instances we've lost in modern Western culture, where individualism is on the rise. We see ourselves as sort of individuals, and we get to choose, to hang out with this person or that person, but we really don't necessarily see ourselves as existing in relationship. Whereas for the Indigenous, they really see their connection with God, with the Creator, with all creatures, all different kinds of species, and then with one another. And of course, the most vital of those relationships being in the family. Of course, the unfortunate aspect of that too is, of course, when you have these kinds of traumas, it affects that whole web. The relationship is thrown off with God, with creation, with one another, with families, when you experience a bombshell of trauma that they've suffered in the residential schools. So it's really this beauty, this profound and beautiful aspect at the heart of Indigenous culture, this interconnectedness, which of course is near and dear to Pope Francis. We hear that in Laudato Si, we see that in Fratelli Tutti, that everything is connected. What we do to our brothers and sisters affects what we do to the earth, and vice versa. And the Indigenous know that, and Pope Francis realizes that they know that. And so this is really about trying to heal some of those relationships, trying to help them to move forward with this beautiful web, which has also been described as a beautiful tree of relationships that in many cases sought to be uprooted. The residential school system sought to remove children from their parents and sought to remove, therefore, parents from the lives of their children. One woman shared with us that she was taken away and she never saw her parents again because they died, especially with some of the death rates in some of these Indigenous communities. So it's really trying to restore that beautiful web of relationships, which is also something that the Indigenous can teach us, not only in the church, but also in society at large.
Yes, indeed, and certainly listening to some of those stories have been very difficult. Now, right now, we're seeing live an image of Prime Minister Trudeau meeting with the Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin. Before we were looking at the images of the doors there, so just to explain to our viewers right now, the Holy Father is meeting with the Governor General. The Secretary of State is meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau. After they meet for a few moments, they'll do a bit of a switch. So the Prime Minister will meet with the Holy Father for a bit, and then the Vatican Secretary of State will meet with the Governor General. On the phone with us right now is Julian Paparella. He's in Quebec City, and we see the Holy Father now with the Prime Minister. That was a quick exchange. And so the Prime Minister actually, for those of you who have been tuning in throughout the week, we've seen him in Edmonton. We seem to have lost the feed. Now, much like with the Governor General, there is just a moment for what we call a photo op, and then media are asked to leave while the private meeting takes place between the Pope and the Prime Minister in this case. And now we have our feedback. But yes, Prime Minister Trudeau was in Edmonton to greet Pope Francis on Sunday. He was also in Muscatchees, and he has been seen throughout, with other dignitaries. It's been interesting to note Julian Paparella on the ground with Salt and Light in Edmonton and now in Quebec City. But I was watching a news conference with some of the Treaty 6 chiefs, Treaty 6 where Edmonton is located, and one of the chiefs was talking about the importance of there not being any speeches other than Pope Francis, at least for this Edmonton leg, that it's not Indigenous leaders speaking, it's not a Prime Minister or a Governor General or another elected official, but it's the Pope speaking, so that everyone can listen to him, hear his words, absorb, so to speak, his words. And of course, people wanting to hear that apology, which he provided on Monday, or reiterated again, and then of course his wisdom that he shared about walking together and reconciliation and hope and healing, which we've been talking about throughout. So we are back to the doors outside the Governor General's residence in Quebec City at the Citadel. Now, Julian, you had mentioned family bonds and the importance of family and web, and the Holy Father used that image of a tree, which I thought was wonderful. He spoke at Sacred Heart Church, where he spoke about the roots and really the roots of the importance of having the roots of your culture, and not forgetting this, but always kind of going back to it and being able to see where you came from, so to speak, to have your language, to have your tradition. So it's been interesting to see that theme come throughout all his speeches, and I wonder if we'll hear that again throughout this leg of the journey in Quebec City. Francis and I were talking earlier about the history, the significant history of this area to Canada, really established in the 1600s. So I suppose we probably will hear that theme continued.
Yeah, I think this theme of relationship, of how we're all connected to one another in the midst of our differences and diversity, is really key for Pope Francis, but also key to this whole trip. Of course, the occasion for speaking about roots has also been linked with the importance of grandparents, which is vital for the Indigenous, but also, of course, celebrated yesterday on the feast of St. Anne and Joachim, the grandparents of Jesus, which is, of course, a theme that will continue, we can expect throughout the week, because tomorrow the Pope will be at St. Anne de Beaupré. So this figure of St. Anne, who is so important for the Indigenous, who is the grandmother of Jesus, the mother of Mary, highlights this connectedness, this rootedness, this intergenerational bond, this web that continues through time. And I think, like you're mentioning, Quebec City is perhaps one of the most historic parts of Canada. One of the ways that we're connected with each other is also through history, through time. It's not only about being connected with other human beings who are living at the same time as we are in the world right now, but it's also being connected with the generations that have preceded us, and at the same time moving forward towards all those generations that will come after us. And I think the Indigenous have a very keen sense of that. Again, it's something that in many ways has often been lost in contemporary Western society, but I think we can regain that through this process of reconciliation, of healing. It's one of the things I think that we can learn from the Indigenous. And it's certainly something that Pope Francis is trying to highlight here this week. He spoke already in April, on the 1st of April, when the three delegations, Métis, First Nations, and Inuit, came to be with him in Rome. He spoke of this beautiful tree, of their spirituality, of their language, of their culture, that had such deep roots, but then that was thought to be cut down. So we can only hope and imagine that the future will also be trying to reestablish the vitality of that tree, trying to get the sap, as he mentioned yesterday, to keep going from their deep roots to flourish, to bear fruit, to flower, not only now during this week, but certainly for the years, the generations to come.
Indeed, and Julian, but before I let you go, I'm just wondering, is there any particular event that stood out in your mind as something that you found as, say, the most profound for you, or the most moving of the different events thus far?
I've got to say, so far it was really Monday morning at Masquatchis, also because our Salt and Light crew had been there on site in Masquatchis, this small little community about an hour south of Edmonton. We had gone there on Friday to be able to film, to speak with the pastor of the parish that the Pope went to pray for, that parish where he saw this huge list of all the missing children related to the residential school system, which he kissed. He kissed those names that are there of these children that went missing. He prayed there and then went to the cemetery. We visited that church. We visited that cemetery. We got to pray there in that cemetery. We were able to meet some of the elders, some of the residential school survivors. So really having that depth, being there on the Friday, getting to know their story, listening to them, really being moved by them, in some ways even being heartbroken by what they shared with us, and then coming back on the Monday with Pope Francis's arrival. Really, that was the start of his visit. Of course, there was the official welcome at the airport the day before, but that was the first major event. And I think it's key that he started there. And so for me, even as a Canadian, of course, I'm not Indigenous myself, but the fact that we would have this deep wound, perhaps the greatest wound in Canadian history, this mistreatment of the Indigenous peoples of our territories in so many different ways, their territory, their land that we came to, where they welcomed us, and yet in so many ways we mistreated them. Then him coming here to heal that wound in our country, for me, was so powerful, and I hope that will just resonate throughout the whole week, and really for decades to come.
Absolutely, and certainly being able to experience that firsthand, what a memory. So, Julian, I want to thank you very much for joining us on the line from Quebec City. Thank you for the material and the reports that you've been providing to you and your team. Give our best and travel safely, Julian. Thank you. That was Julian Paparella, Associate Salt and Light Producer, joining us on the ground in Quebec City, traveling across the country, a few thousand kilometers today, and it's been a bit of a tight day, a bit of a busy day, and there's still lots to come, certainly. Today, after we have the meeting at the Citadel, we'll be having a Mass at St. Anne de Beaupré tomorrow, as well as Vespers, and then on Friday, there'll be some other gatherings of meetings with Indigenous. There'll also be actually a meeting amongst the Jesuits in Canada. And as well, we'll then head to Iqaluit on Friday and for a couple of events, and then that will wrap up Pope Francis's visit. So certainly there's still plenty to come, and there's still more to come this evening. We're seeing the
wide shot right now of the Citadel. And it's a Frontenac Castle that we see.
Frontenac Castle, sorry. Thank you,
okay.
Francis. It's great to have someone familiar with
the camera is positioned at the Citadel.
There we go. Okay, so there's some connection. So right now the Holy Father is meeting with the Prime Minister. He was just meeting with the Governor General, and I believe actually we have on the line Father Alan Fogarty. And Father Fogarty is the CEO of Salt and Light. And Father Fogarty, are you there? We don't quite have him yet, I guess. We have several folks. We have several folks on the ground. We're just trying to connect with them as we await the meetings with the Prime Minister and with the Governor General to conclude. But we'll try to connect with Father Fogarty, and he's been traveling along on this apostolic voyage. He's had an opportunity to celebrate the Mass at Commonwealth Stadium, as well as he'll be part of that meeting with the Jesuits on Friday. So certainly a lot of powerful things to come, and we'll hopefully be able to connect with him and get his perspective. But in the meantime, as we await the conclusion of these meetings, this is, again, what we've talked about in the past, being kind of the responsibility of the head of state going through these kind of meetings with your Governor General, with the Prime Minister, and then I think we'll see probably more of that pastoral aspect of the visit, in which the Holy Father will have Mass. Of course, tomorrow at St. Anne de Beaupré, and then Vespers. So still plenty more to come. They've been pacing out the events. Usually there's an event in the morning, then an event in the evening, with a few hours in between. And the Holy Father was staying at St. Joseph's Seminary in Edmonton, but here in Quebec City he'll be staying at an Augustinian monastery. Francis, do you know the lay of the land as to how far the Holy Father would need to travel, say, from the Citadel to the monastery?
No, it's about 10 minutes walking
Oh,
But,
wow, so
we
quite
know
close.
that he doesn't walk and he takes a car, so it's very, very close. All those, the old Quebec is very small in terms. It maybe take maybe an hour to do the round tour. So yeah, everything is very close by, and no, I think another maybe important element and event that's going to happen tomorrow after the Mass at Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré is the meetings and the Vespers that will happen in the Cathedral of
Yes.
Notre-Dame de Québec.
Yes.
And I think it's all those elements. Sometimes people
Yes.
don't know how to organize. Pope Francis have been very consistent throughout his pontificate about how Apostolic Voyage happened, and I think that meeting with the clergy and all the people of the involved in pastoral, I think it's really something that is always like it's sine qua non of every visit. So I'm really looking forward for
That's right.
that event.
And one person who is part of who I suspect will be concelebrating as part of the Mass at Saint Anne de Beaupré, and who was concelebrating at the Commonwealth Stadium Mass, was Father Alan Fogarty, CEO of Salt and Light Television. I believe we have you on the line now, Father Fogarty. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Good to talk to you.
It's good to hear from you, Father. What an experience over the last few days, Father. What was it like to be at Commonwealth Stadium as part of the concelebrants for that Mass with over 65,000 people?
Well, it was really quite an experience because there were so many people. It was a beautiful day, and there were of course a number of concelebrating priests, but the entourage of Pope Francis as well, the Secretary of State Pietro Parolin was concelebrating as well, and Richard Smith, who is the Archbishop of Edmonton. It was a beautiful time. It was, there's some controversy about him using Latin instead of maybe English or so, but the message was fantastic. The message, and he was really calling upon into the past, looking deep into the past, and calling that into the present moment for the future. So again, we have those three moments that are always happening, but he's looking to the future. Very sorry about the past. But yes, so that message was really inspiring.
Yes, that was. It was interesting. We've been talking here in studio about the way that the trip has been put together. Francis called it the logical way that it's been put together, where we have that first day where really the Holy Father asking for forgiveness and that message of reconciliation, and then as the events carried on, as we moved from Masquatchis to the Sacred Heart Church, then to the Commonwealth Mass, and then to Lac Ste last night. There was that movement, that walking together of reconciliation, more of a message of hope coming into the narrative. It was really a beautiful moment, certainly listening to what the Holy Father had to say over the course of the last couple of days.
It's true, and I think that progression involves respecting the past, but as he was talking, he saying, the passion came from the past. There was a fire there from the ancestors, from the past, that we must tend today. It's up to us. We have to make an active will. We have to do something ourselves, respecting the past, but also taking responsibility ourselves for the future. So there was really a call there from the Pope to, be part of the solution, I think, and it's not in any way diminishing anything that happened in the past, but it's like, let's look forward and be hopeful.
That's right, yes. In fact, I recall the one thing that certainly stood out for me at his homily during the Liturgy of the Word at Lac Ste, when he spoke about gathering at Lac Ste together and starting afresh together and starting new, and this acknowledging the past but then moving forward together. Now, Father, as a Jesuit, you must be quite excited about the Friday meeting with the Pope. There's that private meeting with members of the Society of Jesus. Is there any kind of insight you can provide into that? What would you expect of a meeting with the Holy Father? Of course, himself a Jesuit.
Well, of course, by definition, it's private, and he likes them to be private. But I have been in touch with the people around him and how they handle these private meetings with Jesuits when he is traveling. And so Father Antonio Spadaro, who is the director of La Citadel Católica, he and I have been back and forth, as well as Matteo Bruni, who is director of the Holy See Press Office. They're both telling me, this is the way that it will happen, the protocols and so on. So we worked that out, but important in the message was the Holy Father does not want to sit and speak to us. He wants to engage with us like we're at a community meeting. Those are my words, community meeting, but the way it was described to me is he's waiting for questions from us, questions that are coming from the Canadian context, that are coming from our history working with the Indigenous. And so that's what he's waiting for, to engage us, to see where we are, and to then perhaps provide some insight and some guidance and help for us. So that's the meeting on Friday morning.
And it's interesting that you say that, because it really then does mirror the other meetings throughout this journey where we've seen him meet and have those individual encounters with elders, with leaders within the Indigenous community, with non-Indigenous people as well. That connectivity that the Holy Father always seems to bring with him when he travels to different countries and even within Rome itself.
It's true, Matthew, and I think that part of the dynamic here is I will be in the meeting as a Jesuit, and as we know, I'm obviously working at Salt and Light as CEO and trying to guide the work there, and what we've already done with the first documentary, Walking Together, and as we produce the second, it's in motion now. As you know, the idea is we are engaging, I am engaging, and trying to be, this is part of the attempt to be part of the solution. So we're already a bit, down the road with that solution, hoping that we can be or have some positive impact on, what can happen, what is possible after listening to the stories of those who have suffered and listening to the apology on April 1st of Pope Francis in Rome. So we're trying to piece things together, again, keeping as much of the truth and the data that is available to tomorrow. So I think he's going to see where, other Jesuits and I are both, all of us rather, are really engaged already in part of the accompaniment of moving forward.
Yes, certainly a very exciting time. And now, Father Fogarty, before I let you go, just to our viewers, we are waiting for the Holy Father to complete his meeting with the Prime Minister. He's already met with the Governor General at the Citadel in Quebec City. We're waiting for the conclusion of the meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau. And on the phone is Father Alan Fogarty. He's the CEO of Salt and Light. And Father, before you have to head off, I just want to know if there's any particular event that stood out for you, any maybe one event that was a highlight for you, whether it be in Musquecheese or a Commonwealth Stadium Mass or Lac Ste or Sacred Heart Church, anything in particular that you've experienced thus far in the Holy Father's pilgrimage of penance?
Well, I think, it's really hard for me to pinpoint one moment, because every time he speaks, he's offering something new. As you've mentioned, he's delineating a whole new way. Well, not so whole new, but at the same time, he's giving us a fresh look using analogies from the past, calling on all kinds of images, as he will do today, to bring us forward. So I think each time I hear his speeches or his homilies, I'm inspired. So it kind of puts a pin in that moment, like a pin on a map, really. It's just each moment is great. But yesterday, Chief Tony Alexis spoke at the shrine at Saint Anne and so it was really a moment where he supported Pope Francis. He's aware of the pain, obviously he is, but he was very supportive of the Pope's message. So that was a moment and I spoke with him and thanked him for that, and let the Holy See know that he was very supportive. think that for me was a personal moment in light of what Francis is doing.
Yes, thank you very much. And of course, those personal moments are so very important in the overall journey. So thank you, Father Fogarty, for joining us on the phone today. We appreciate you being with us for a few minutes, and we certainly wish you the best in the rest of the Holy Father's papal visit as you travel along in the footsteps in Quebec City and then on to Iqaluit. So thank you, Father Fogarty, for joining us.
Thank you very much, and all the best at home base.
All right, that was Father Alan Fogarty, CEO of Salt and Light, joining us live from Quebec City. It's been a busy day so far, certainly more so for the papal entourage. Of course, they left Edmonton around 9 a.m. Mountain Time, arriving in Quebec City at 3 p.m. Eastern. And there were some flight delays, which resulted in this particular event that we're on the air now, reporting on that being delayed by about an hour. What's happened is that the Holy Father and company are at the Citadel. There's been a meeting with the Governor General. The Holy Father is meeting now with the Prime Minister of Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and we're waiting for that meeting to conclude. Once that meeting concludes, there will be an address by the Governor General as well as an address from the Holy Father. And I'm joined in studio with Francis Denis. He is the French host for our coverage of Pope Francis's Apostolic voyage to Canada. And Francis, we've been sitting around for a bit now, so I think that it's been a very fruitful, or I'm hopeful that it's very fruitful conversations between the Holy Father, Pope Francis, and the Prime Minister and the Governor General as well. So I think they started maybe about 40 minutes ago now. So it's certainly it'll be interesting to hear what kind of things they were talking about, or if it's alluded to in any of the speeches. We'll have to wait and see, I guess.
Yeah, well, we can speculate about what teams or maybe what they are saying altogether. We may have some suggestion that with the Governor General, it's because her role is less political. She's more symbolic. She's the head of state, of course. She's the representative of Her Majesty the Queen of Canada, Elizabeth II. So, but I think he might have a more personal exchange with her because, in fact, she's Inuit, and the Pope is going to Iqaluit in near future, in 2 days from now. So I think maybe he might ask her, like, what do you think of this visit? Pope Francis has been very friendly in the sense of he's really putting fraternity in the center of his diplomacy, and what he even wrote a document, Fratelli Tutti, like we are all brothers and sisters. So I think this diplomacy of normalcy, we could say, I think it is going to be bringing that, but that's only my speculation because obviously we don't know what they are saying in those private meetings. With Prime Minister Trudeau, I would say it's more because he's a politician. He's the one who's making the decision for the entire country. I might say he's, having conversations about the different challenges that Canada is facing. Yes, of course, with the Indigenous people, but with the pandemic, all the events that were affecting our country in the recent past. I think they're gonna have a good conversation. Of course, there are different conversation with Cardinal Parolin, because we have seen that they are kind of moving chairs from chairs. Cardinal Parolin is the Vatican Secretary of State, which is the one who's really in relationship with the different governments all over the world, and he's the head of the diplomatic corps as well. So I think we have seen that Justin Trudeau was accompanied by his own global affair minister, Mélanie Joly. So I think the more diplomatic aspect of the relationship between the Vatican State and the Holy See, basically, and Canada has been brought forward during those meetings.
And we are seeing images now of the meeting between the Cardinal Parolin and the Governor General Mary Simon. and other members of the diplomatic corps who have traveled with the Holy Father. We've also got, I believe, the Sub-Secretariat of State. I believe there's also, and here we have both the Prime Minister and Governor General with Pope Francis.
Many of these images from Vatican media, I believe they have, because they're private meetings, they were allowing the camera to be turned on for a certain amount of times, and they were trying to bring us as much as possible to do so we can have a certain idea of the atmosphere on the ground.
Exactly, Francis. Those who have been watching us throughout this coverage may recall at one point a camera moving very quickly away, and I suspect what happened is we were getting a little bit of a clip and then maybe a bit of an edit so that they can help.
It explains why Mary Siemens was with Cardinal Parolin and a few seconds after with the Pope outside.
That's right, and then that allows them the opportunity to get in place so that they can be prepared to provide their remarks. Because as we've said, Governor General is to provide some remarks, and the Holy Father is to provide remarks. And Prime Minister Trudeau may be speaking as well. Not sure. We've heard some speculation. We'll wait and see. But again, unlike previous remarks where it was the Holy Father addressing, say, an Indigenous community or perhaps addressing Catholics or Christians, this address will be provided to all Canadians. It's being seen for everyone, which I suppose makes sense of being with the Governor General at the Citadel, this more kind of political aspect of the visit. So we're expecting those remarks to begin shortly. There's still quite a bit to occur throughout this Quebec City visit. Obviously, we've talked about the big Mass tomorrow at St. Anne-de-Beaupré. We've got Vespers, a private meeting with the members of the Society of Jesus, which we just spoke to Salt and Light CEO Father Alan Fogarty about. And then it's in the morning that we'll see a meeting with a delegation of Indigenous peoples from Eastern Canada. And then the Holy Father will be leaving Quebec City. Sorry, this is on Friday. He'll be leaving Quebec City Friday around noon and then going to Iqaluit. And he's only there for the afternoon. So it's going to be a very condensed portion of the trip. And Friday's certainly shaping up to be quite busy. So today's a bit more of a quieter day, I guess, Francis, and then it gets very busy over the next 2 days, much like what it was in Edmonton.
Yeah, previously I had the opportunity, speaking of Iqaluit, I had the opportunity to speak with the parish priest there, and he explained to me how it's a unique environment, especially for the Catholic Church, because you have, of course, the Inuit people who live there, but it's a really a ground where people go for work, and they come from all over the world. So he's maintaining a parish, and at the Mass he's got people from all over the world coming to work there, and then they leave. They may live there for 1 to 3 years, and then they left, and then the others are coming. So it's a very specific environment for the church and to exercise there. Obviously, the Pope was going to meet with different representatives. Also, Monsignor Poisson from the CCCB, they really made it a priority for the Pope to bring the Pope, as they say, bring the Pope to Nunavut in Iqaluit, because it was kind of impossible to bring that community down, all those people down to the south of Canada. So I believe we have images from the meeting with the authorities.
Yes,
Cardinal Collins at the
Cardinal Collins. That front row, we saw several members of the papal entourage, including Archbishop Smith, who was in Edmonton. Now he was elected by his brother bishops to help coordinate this visit. So we've seen him throughout, but Cardinal Ouellet is there, of course, Cardinal Lacroix, as well as Cardinal Parolin, who we just spoke about. The Apostolic Nuncio is there, Archbishop Trikovic. And so, of course, we'll have the Holy Father and the Governor General taking their places.
It is a very small area. I've been covering and seeing a lot of people visit all over the world, and sometimes those meetings with the civil authorities are in very impressive area or political parliaments, and now it's very, very small. Ici, Premier Legault speaking. So having all those important people, key important people for political and national political life here in Canada, all gathered in a small small area like that. It helps bringing maybe that fraternity aspect.
Exactly.
So they can
and
be more friendly.
We know certainly as part of the official delegation, there was two chiefs who were going to be in attendance. One was a Grand Chief. Grand Chief of the Cree Nation government, Ms. Mandigo Masty, as well as Grand Chief of the Huron-Wendat Nation, Mr. Remy Vincent. So beside, there's Cardinal, we've got left to right Cardinal-elect, Cardinal Turley, Cardinal Lacroix, Cardinal Parolin, of course, the Secretary of State in the background. A few familiar faces as well, including folks who were part of the delegation to Rome from the Métis Nation, President of the Métis National Council, Cassidy Caron. I thought I also saw Nathan Obed, who's President of the Inuit Tapirit Kanatami. Gentleman with the white hair is the Honorable Michel Doyon, Lieutenant Governor of Quebec. Now, worth noting for Cardinal Cherney, who's a Canadian Jesuit. Michael Cherney, actually. He's the prefect of the dicastery for promoting integral human development. And he was made a cardinal in 2019. Cardinal Collins and Archbishop Smith would have actually received the pallium at the same time from Pope Benedict in 2008, I believe it was. There was a group of about 5 Canadian archbishops receiving the pallium, including Archbishop Collins, then Archbishop Collins, Archbishop Smith, Archbishop Prendergast. Those are the Ottawa area. Archbishop Brendan O'Brien, I believe, who's retired now. He's with the Archdiocese of Kingston. Archbishop Michael Miller out in Vancouver. So Not sure if we've seen it yet, but I believe that there will be an Inuit elder who will light a quilik, or a kudlik, and it's a traditional oil lamp used by Inuit, and it's I believe it's used with seal oil. Or with whale blubber, and it's to, of course, in the Arctic, if there may be no wood, so this particular lamp was incredibly important. And that's one of the aspects of this ceremony, of this meeting, where we see certainly throughout this visit where we've had.
Bienvenue à la Citadel. Je m'appelle Nathalie Babin-Dufresne et je suis directrice des communications ici à Rideau Hall et je serai votre maître des cérémonies. C'est un
I'm the
honneur
director of
d'être
communication
ici
of
parmi
Rideau
vous
Hall,
aujourd'hui.
and she will be the
Notre
MC for
photographe
tonight.
officiel prendra des
Today's event.
photos qui seront partagées avec vous dans les jours à venir. Je vous demande donc de ne pas prendre des photos ou des vidéos
There's
pendant la
certain
cérémonie.
request
Maintenant,
not to take
veuillez,
pictures
s'il vous plaît, vous
and
assurer
security
que vos téléphones
remarks
sont
before the
éteints.
meeting happens.
Nous comprenons qu'aujourd'hui puisse être une journée difficile pour
We understand
certains.
that today might
d'entre
be a
vous.
difficult day.
Veuillez noter que nous avons des travailleurs de soutien en santé mentale prêts
There's
à aider
workers,
les invités
healthcare
qui en ont
providers that
besoin.
can help if people
Avant de
feel
commencer, j'aimerais présenter M.
don't feel very
Alexandre
well because of what they are
de
hearing.
Lac-Ste Shefferville qui jouera le
A little
tambour
bit
pour
what
l'arrivée
the same
de sa
thing
sainteté
that
et son
we're
excellence.
providing in the Masquerade
Merci
Cheese.
à tous. Hello and welcome to the Citadel. My name is Nathalie Babin-Dufresne. I'm Director of Communications at Rideau Hall, and I'll be your Masters of Ceremony. It's an honor to be here with you today. As our official photographer will be taking photos, which will be shared with you in the coming days, I would ask that you not take any photos or videos during the ceremony. At this time, I would also ask that you ensure that your cell phones are turned off. We understand that today might be difficult for some guests, and please note that we have some mental health support workers ready to assist guests in need of support. I would now like to introduce Alexandre McKenzie from Matimekush Shefferville to play drum as we welcome His Holiness and Her Excellency. Thank you. Je vous invite à vous lever, si vous le pouvez, pour accueillir Sa Sainteté, le Pape François,
I ask you
leurs
to
Excellences et le Premier
Stand up
ministre.
to welcome the Prime Minister.
I invite you to please rise, if you are able, and welcome His Holiness, Pope Francis, Their Excellencies, and the Prime Minister.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody here, the Prime Minister, Pope Francis.
Ino.
People stay alive. And I'd like to welcome Mary Simone.
Bad bad no. When the sea and one mamu Kristanano, Tichi was a Vendaya, Tichi we mamu, while we dwelt to one in the one with our stem away in music.
I'd just like to ask everybody to remember our people that have passed.
And when they keep pay with the statement, then Mawatanan was set, and then go Kagata Castigate, change and you would discuss again.
Today I'd like to remember the children that has passed, that did not come home, and I would like to pray for the survivors.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Veuillez vous asseoir. Please be seated. Au nom de leurs excellences, la très honorable Mary Simon et Monsieur Whit Fraser, je vous souhaite la bienvenue à cette cérémonie. On behalf of their excellencies, the Right Honorable Mary Simon and Mr. Whit Fraser, I welcome you to this ceremony. Just prior to the beginning of the ceremony, a traditional Inuit lamp known as the kulik was lit to mark this important day. Traditionally, the kulik was lit by Inuit women to bring warmth and light to their home. Today, we are grateful for Olipika Rebecca Vivi from Nunavut, who will tend the kulik throughout the ceremony. Nous allumons le kulik, la lampe traditionnelle inuite, lors d'événements importants comme la cérémonie d'aujourd'hui. Cette lampe est utilisée dans le Nord pour apporter lumière et chaleur à la demeure. Nakulik. Pour commencer, j'aimerais inviter l'aîné Raymond Gros-Louis de la Première Nation Huron-Wendat à prononcer des mots de bienvenue. I would like to invite Elder Raymond Gros-Louis of the Huron-Wendat First Nations to offer words of welcome.
On va rester assis. Par contre, je vais vous demander quelque chose de spécial.
He asked for something
Vous
special.
savez, avec la pandémie qui s'est
with the
passée,
pandemic
il
that
y a beaucoup
happened,
de choses qui ont changé dans nos cérémonies.
a lot of
Et on n'a pas eu le choix de
things
s'adapter.
changed during our
Et
ceremony. We
j'aimerais
had
ça
to adapt
que
ourselves.
quand je vais commencer
I would
à
like, when I will start
allumer la sauge,
to
faire
enlight
mon lien avec
the
les quatre
sauge,
directions.
I will send it to the four direction.
Je vais aller porter au pape François
But before I will bring to the Pope
poids d'odeur
Francis,
et une plume de dinde sauvage qui est un animal de survie pour les Wendat sur le
we'll bring him a
territoire.
gift,
Donc,
which
je vais
represent
remettre cette plume et
a
ce
survival.
foin d'odeur. Le foin d'odeur, c'est, il va servir le pape pour il va purifier par l'odorat.
is through
Donc,
through
je sais
respiration
que
that
le pape
he will
François a un peu de misère
get
avec la
purified.
fumée. Donc,
We know that the Pope
il y
Francis
aura
has a little
beaucoup de
bit difficulty
façons
with
de
smoke,
faire une cérémonie et de
but
s'adapter.
he will
Et je pense
adapt
que c'est important que
the
le pape
ceremony
François
to
reçoive
make
ce
sure
foin
the
d'odeur
Pope Francis
et cette plume-là pour
receive
participer en même temps au smudge aux quatre directions.
and be able to participate to the smudging ceremony.
Quoi aviti novencio,
Speaking in Huron Wendat.
Chiati andisha wenandui, Chiati mongolui, Chiati anaharisqua, Wendat ndi Wendat indare. Ça fait pas longtemps que j'ai réappris ma langue.
He just learned back to speak his own language.
Parce que quand que je me présente en ma langue,
When he presents himself in his language, he's not speaking in his own name, but on behalf of his entire nation. He's going to stand up and bring the gift to His Holiness. He's making small joke about his difficulty to walk. That gift represents something very important for his own nation, Rwanda. And then he gave a branch that will be used to be burned for him, explaining that this branch smells very, very good. The Pope himself gave, at his turn, a gift to Monsieur Gros Louis, important member of the Euro-Wendat nation, which reserved territories near Quebec City. Actually, it's almost inside the city.
Les petits vidéos là, qu'on se sert, je m'étais aperçu que même si on n'est pas en présentiel, on peut faire des choses à partir de l'esprit.
During the COVID, he saw that even if we are not in presence, we can continue to live things through spirit, through the mind.
Parce que le feu sacré
The sacred fire unite everything of all creation. We're going to put some tobacco, virtual tobacco. He has a good sense of humor. We're going to bring also all the four elements: water, air, fire, and land. The vegetal,
fire, air, and earth.
Human and animal also will all be brought together in this ceremony of purification, which is called smudging.
Smudging, yep.
He asked to open the door so we can have access to that direction. He's asking to the south to open the door of that direction. He's asking to the west to open its door, the door of the kukum of the grandmother, so we can honor the direction of north, the direction of grandfathers. He also make a special direction for Inuits, because they are a minority inside a minority, and it's important to make a special mention to them. And he's very happy that they started the meeting with the Kulik, and it's an honor to have that culture represented in that meeting. I will also open the four direction with my lute. It's an heritage that he received 20 years ago that he's using in his ceremonies. And he asked the people gathered to put their hands towards the direction of their heart. The heart is where the Creator has put His wisdom. And we have to remember that special gesture in order to understand each other more and to put this wisdom into practice. Ask to the Kukum of the West to give us the access of the sacred lands of the Spirit, so in order that they are present among us, so we could be more united altogether. Thank you, Holy Father, great Pope Francis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
J'aimerais maintenant inviter le très honorable Justin Trudeau à prononcer quelques mots. I now invite the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau to say a few words.
Chers aînés, Raymond,
Dear elders,
dirigeants autochtones, le très Saint-Père, Excellence, Premier ministre Legault, je suis très heureux
naming everybody there.
aujourd'hui et de pouvoir
I'm very pleased to be together with you today.
Je tiens d'abord à
I would
remercier
like
les
to
Premières
thank
Nations qui ont fréquenté
all the First Nations
ce territoire
that
pendant des millénaires
have
pour
lived
leur accueil sur leur
into
territoire
this
traditionnel.
territory for centuries. And
As we welcome His Holiness this week, it's important to reflect on the significance of this moment for survivors, for Indigenous peoples, and indeed for all Canadians. Hier,
yesterday,
le 26 juillet,
on 26
c'était
July,
la fête
it
de
was the
Sainte-Anne.
feast of Saint Anne.
Sainte-Anne,
Saint
c'est
Anne,
une figure importante.
an important figure for
Elle
Catholics.
représente
She
l'amour
represents
maternel.
the loving
Elle
mother.
représente aussi
It also
la
represents the family.
La famille,
Family
c'est nos racines.
it's our roots. It's what helps us to grow and to discover the
La
world.
famille,
Family
c'est la première chose
is the
qui a été
first
enlevée aux
thing
enfants.
that was taken from all the young people that were sent to the
Quand j'ai
residential
visité
schools.
Kamloops,
When I visited
Cowessess,
Kamloops
Williams Lake,
and Williams Lake,
quand je parle avec les survivants,
when I speak with
avec les familles,
survivors, with families,
je pense aux enfants.
I think of the children, but I also think of the
As a
parents.
dad, I can't imagine my kids being taken away. When my kids are crying, I can console them. When they're happy, I can share that feeling of joy with them, of accomplishment. But in residential schools, these children were alone and isolated in their pain and sorrow, far from their families and communities, and even worse, stripped of their language, their culture, their identity. Une solitude profonde.
There's a profound solitude.
De famille et de communauté.
We don't speak only of families and community, but their culture, their language, their identity.
Depuis la publication en 2015 du rapport
Since the publication of the final report of the Commission of Truth and Reconciliation,
Premières
the
Nations,
First Nations,
Inuit et
Inuit and Métis,
demande au pape de
are
présenter
asking
des excuses aux
the
survivants.
Pope to ask for forgiveness to the survivors, the family and communities.
Des excuses pour
Those
le rôle de
excuses
l'Église catholique romaine comme institution a joué
Those excuses from
sur le plan spirituel,
that the Pope should say in the name of the Church
émotionnel
for all what
et
the
sexuel.
Church and what happened in the
que les
residential
enfants
schools,
autochtones ont
sexual,
subi dans les pensionnats
spiritual,
dirigés par l'Église.
and all the residential schools directed by the
L'événement
Church.
de cette semaine
The event of this week at
n'aurait pas
Masquatchis
été possible sans
would never be possible without the courage and the perseverance of all the survivors
partager leurs souvenirs,
that shared their
raconter leurs
souvenirs,
expériences,
sorrowful souvenirs,
incluant
and the
directement
experience,
le Père lui-même.
and shared the experience directly to the Holy Father.
Previous conversations, from the first time we spoke about this, you always offered your time, genuinely seeking to understand, to do right, and to atone. This week, you recognized the abuses experienced at residential schools that resulted in cultural destruction, loss of life, and ongoing traumas lived by Indigenous peoples in every region of the country. As Your Holiness has said, begging pardon is not the end of the matter. It is a starting point, a first step. On Monday morning, I was sitting with survivors, and I felt their reaction to your apology. Each will take from it what they need, but there's no doubt that you had an enormous impact. Survivors and their descendants need to be at the center of everything we do going forward. In April, Dene National Chief Gerald Antoine was at the Vatican, and he compared the moment to the experience of walking through the snow and seeing fresh moose tracks. It was a feeling of hope. Today, I want to say Let's all continue our work together to keep this hope alive. Quand je suis allé au Vatican il y a
When
5
I
ans,
was in the Vatican 5 years ago,
abordé le sujet des
I was
pensionnats
there
et de la réconciliation
talk
avec
about
votre sainteté.
with
Et je
His
sais que
Holiness
votre
about
présence
the
ici
residential
cette
schools.
semaine
I know that your presence today and this week would never be possible without your personal convictions and your integrity. Thank you.
d'être venu avec le cœur ouvert.
Thank you for being here with us and to come with your open heart.
Que le système des
We
pensionnats
all recognize that the residential schools that tried to assimilate all the Indigenous, today Indigenous
défendre
are continue to defend, to preserve to the language and culture,
traditionnel qui
the
a eu lieu
traditional gathering that happened in Mascoutchees
la
is a
réconciliation.
great example.
C'est notre responsabilité.
That's reconciliation is our
C'est notre
responsibility of
responsabilité
everyone.
de voir nos
It's our
différences
responsibility to see our difference not as obstacles, but as an occasion, an opportunity to better understand
passer à l'action.
each other and to pass to action.
Our Governor General talks often about how reconciliation is not a single act, but a lifetime journey of healing. This journey is different for everyone. I spoke about Saint Anne being a symbol of maternal love and family, but Saint Anne is also a symbol of healing. Tomorrow, Your Holiness will visit Saint Anne de Beaupré. Pilgrims have been traveling there for centuries to pray and to ask Saint Anne to help them heal. So in the spirit of healing, let us never give up. Canadians, institutions, let us continue our work together with Indigenous peoples until we reach a better future for everyone. Merci.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gracias. Tiens, ouais.
Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Thank you, Prime Minister. J'invite Son Excellence, la très honorable Mary Simon, gouverneur général du Canada, à prendre la parole. I would now ask the Governor General, Her Excellency, the Right Honorable Mary Simon, to offer her address.
Bonjour. Hello and good afternoon. Unusakut Kwe. Votre sainteté, je vous
Holiness,
souhaite
I
la
welcome
bienvenue
you
à la Citadel.
at la Citadel.
Welcome, Your Holiness, to the Citadel of Quebec. My husband, Whit, and I are honored to welcome you and to be joined by survivors, elders, leaders, knowledge keepers, diplomats, dignitaries, former commissioners of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and all of those watching from coast to coast to coast. I want to thank the First Nations who have occupied this territory for millennia for welcoming me to their traditional and treaty lands. Peu importe de vous nous écoutez présentement ici à la Citadelle ou ailleurs au Canada. Vous êtes sur un territoire autochtone.
Wherever where you're from, you and listening to what
Your
is happening today,
thank you for making
you are
this visit to Canada on what you have called
on an
your
Indigenous
pilgrimage of
land.
penance. We gather at this historic citadel where stories are shared and ideas are exchanged. With this visit, you're signaling to the world that you and the Roman Catholic Church are joining us on our path of reconciliation, healing, hope, and renewal. It began in Masquatrit, where we witnessed two realities. The first was the hurt and pain of survivors, communities of people who suffered for decades, Indigenous peoples forced to live with policies meant to strip away their cultures, languages, and spiritual beliefs and practices. Survivors who every day carry the trauma of their residential school experience. But these people, these survivors, they defy definition. They are parents who defended their children when no one else would. They are advocates who fought and are still fighting for their languages and cultures so that they can thrive for generations to come. They are artists who are channeling their stories through their music, dance, cultures, and language. They are all proud. They are all strong. Your Holiness, they came to hear what you had to say with hearts and minds open, some willing to forgive, some still living with the hurt, but all willing to listen. Everyone hoping to further their healing journey. Les peuples autochtones ont
The First
montré
Nation
au monde
have shown to the
entier
world,
et
the
continue
entire world, and they
de
continue
nous montrer
and continue
que
to show
malgré
us
les défis auxquels ils peuvent
a new
être
way
confrontés,
to confront all the
ils
challenges
les
that we are at the moment.
affronteront avec dignité et une grande détermination.
With great dignity and determination.
I acknowledge and applaud
I
what has been achieved, what Indigenous communities have achieved with this week's visit. It is Indigenous peoples who worked, waited, and prayed for an apology on Indigenous lands in Canada. They never gave up. We must remember that it is because of their courage and resilience that we are here today. Your Holiness, their efforts make Canada a stronger nation. Sa pililaw si mangimata, ilinyariak titaw hatta si mayubini, taman na aninak si mayok, atok taw si maninga, tukisiyaw tigaswak sugu. Itsirak jwa kapig, how you maniak hotit, nunahakha si mayuit, kanatamik, nukihakti si mata. It is our collective duty to remember what happened at residential schools, to tell the stories of survivors and of those who never made it home, and to support and care for those who did. Support in terms of mental health resources, helping families discover the true fate of those who never made it home, and care for Indigenous peoples who need the time and space to process what this visit means to them and what the next step should be. As you indicated, Your Holiness, this is an important step towards further dialogue and actions that would lead to real reconciliation. Indeed, we look forward to hearing more of the Church's future actions to continue this essential work. On Monday, you visited the Sacred Heart Church of the First Peoples in Edmonton. There, you said that reconciliation is a grace that must be sought. To that, I would also add that reconciliation is a grace that must be earned through continuous hard work and understanding. That work falls to each and every one of us, our sacred responsibility. Il y a un temps pour toutes choses.
There's a time for everything.
In
We are
Canada,
ready.
there has been a monumental shift in our thinking. Now is the time in our country's history and consciousness for reconciliation. As we address this issue and the future health and well-being of Indigenous communities, I put my faith in each of us to encourage healing. In Inuktitut, to heal, Mamisarnet. Mamisarnet is a journey, not a destination. It takes time. It begins slowly, softly, and carefully. It follows its own path, carrying us forward, but also in many other directions. en inuktitut, guérir et mamisarnet. Mamisarnet est un trajet et non une destination. Il faut du temps.
It's a project, not
Ça
a
commence
destination. It
lentement,
needs time.
doucement, prudemment.
It starts
La
slowly,
guérison suit son propre chemin.
but it follows its own path
Nous fait avancer,
and
mais
brings
nous
us
mène aussi dans de
and-
nombreuses autres directions.
and it brings us to other direction that we,
Eventually, healing takes us beyond powerlessness or anger or pain. It takes us beyond trauma. It renews our mental, spiritual, and physical health. I've seen this in action. I've seen healing through art, through community, through kindness, through generosity, through the revitalization of language, culture, and identity. Your Holiness, long after you leave Canada, I know you will continue listening and learning not only about the struggles and pains of these communities, but also about the pride they feel to be Indigenous, their resilience, and how they contribute to Canada and the world. Take these stories back with you, share them widely, and continue to find ways to work together to extend a hand to heal our communities. I have great hope in what I have seen so far during this visit. Canada looks forward to working with the Holy See on reconciliation, as well as many other pressing global issues such as promoting peace and education, breaking down barriers, fighting poverty and disease, and rebuilding trust. Thank you for your efforts. And thank you to all Canadians for hearing and responding to the call for reconciliation. Merci à tous les Canadiens d'avoir entendu
Thank you for all
et
Canadians
répondu à l'appel
to
à
have
la
heard
réconciliation.
this call to reconciliation.
Nakokmehunga tusagun nakatsi nalahatatsilu tamanna katipaliagi hagnibut nunaktuami mo hatigi tsutapitutigilugu. Your Holiness, I wish you the very best on your journey. May the Creator bless us all. Merci, miigwech nakokmeh payanamik.
Thank you, Excellency. I would now invite His Holiness Pope Francis to share his address. J'invite maintenant Sa Sainteté, le Pape François, à prendre la parole.
Señora Gobernadora General, señor Primer Ministro, distinguidas autoridades civiles y religiosas,
Madam Governor General,
estimados
Mr. Prime Minister,
de los pueblos indígenas,
distinguished civil and religious authorities,
cuerpo diplomático,
dear representatives of the Indigenous peoples,
los
honorable
saludo
members of the diplomatic
y le
corps,
agradezco a la señora
ladies and gentlemen,
Simon
I cordially greet you and I thank Her Excellency, the Right Honorable Mary Simon, and His Excellency Justin Trudeau for their kind words. I am happy to be able to address you, who have the responsibility of serving the people of this great country that from sea to sea display an extraordinary natural heritage. Among its many beauties, I think of the immense and spectacular maple forests that make the Canadian countryside uniquely colorful and variegated. I would like to take as my starting point the symbol par excellence of these lands, the maple leaf, which, starting from the seal of Quebec, rapidly spread to become the emblem that appears on the national flag. That development took place in relatively recent times. But the maple trees preserve the memory of many past generations. Going back, the native peoples extracted maple sap, with which they concocted wholesome and healthy syrups. This makes us think of their industriousness and their constant concern to protect the land and the environment, in fidelity to a harmonious vision of creation as an open book that teaches human beings to love the Creator and to live in symbiosis with other living creatures. We can learn much from the ability to listen attentively to God, to persons, and to nature. And we need it, especially amid the dizzying and frenzied pace of today's world, marked by a constant rapidification, which makes difficult a truly human, sustainable, and integral development, and ends up creating a society of weariness and disillusionment, which finds it hard to recover the taste for contemplation, authentic relationships, the mystique of togetherness. How much we need to listen to and dialogue with one another in order to step back from the prevailing individualism, from hasty judgments, widespread aggressiveness, and the temptation to divide the world into good people and bad. The large size of the maple leaves, which absorb polluted air and in turn give out oxygen, invite us to marvel at the beauty of creation and to appreciate the wholesome values present in the indigenous cultures. They can inspire us all and help to heal harmful tendencies to exploitation, exploiting not only creation but also time and relationships, and basing human activity solely on what proves useful and profitable. These vital teachings, however, were violently opposed in the past. I think above all of the policies of assimilation and enfranchisement, also involving the residential school system, which harmed many indigenous families by undermining their language, culture, and worldview. In that deplorable system, promoted by the government authorities of the time, which separated many children from their families, different local Catholic institutions had a part. For this reason, I express my deep shame and sorrow, and together with the bishops of this country, I renew my request for forgiveness for the wrong done by so many Christians to the indigenous peoples. It is tragic when some believers, as happened in that period of history, conform themselves to the conventions of the world rather than to the gospel. The Christian faith has played an essential role in shaping the highest ideals of Canada, characterized by the desire to build a better country for all its people. At the same time, it is necessary, in admitting our faults, to work together to accomplish a goal that I know all of you share, to promote the legitimate rights of the native populations, and to favor processes of healing and reconciliation between them and the non-Indigenous people of the country. That is reflected in the commitment to respond in a fitting way to the appeals of the Commission for Truth and Reconciliation, as well as in the concern to acknowledge the rights of the native peoples. The Holy See and local Catholic communities are concretely committed to promoting the Indigenous cultures through specific and appropriate forms of spiritual accompaniment, that include attention to their cultural traditions, customs, languages, and educational processes, in the spirit of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It is our desire to renew the relationship between the Church and the Indigenous peoples of Canada, a relationship marked both by a love that has borne outstanding fruit and, tragically, deep wounds that we are committed to understanding and healing. I am truly grateful to have encountered and listened to various representatives of the Indigenous peoples in recent months in Rome, and to be able, here in Canada, to renew the good relations established there. The time we spent together made an impression on me and left a firm desire to respond to the indignation and shame for the sufferings endured by the Indigenous peoples, and to move forward on a fraternal and patient journey with all Canadians in accordance with truth and justice, working for healing and reconciliation and constantly inspired by hope.
Esforzándonos por la sanación y la reconciliación, animados siempre por la esperanza. Aquella historia de dolor y de desprecios.
That history of suffering and contempt, the fruit of the colonizing mentality, does not heal easily. Indeed, it should make us realize that colonization has not ended. In many places, it has been transformed, disguised, and concealed. This is the case with forms of ideological colonization. In the past, the colonialist mentality disregarded the concrete life of people and imposed certain predetermined cultural models. Yet today, too, there are any number of forms of ideological colonization that clash with the reality of life, stifle the natural attachment of peoples to their values, and attempt to uproot their traditions, history, and religious ties. This mentality, presumptuously thinking that the dark pages of history have been left behind, become open to the cancel culture that would judge the past purely on the basis of certain contemporary categories. The result is a cultural fashion that levels everything out, makes everything equal, proves intolerant of differences, and concentrates on the present moment, on the needs and rights of individuals, while frequently neglecting their duties with regard to the most weak and vulnerable of our brothers and sisters, the poor, migrants, the elderly, the sick, the unborn. They are the forgotten ones in affluent societies. They are the ones who, amid general indifference, are cast aside like dry leaves to be burned. Instead, the rich, multicolored foliage of the maple trees reminds us of the importance of the whole, the importance of developing human communities that are not blandly uniform, but truly open and inclusive. And just as every leaf is fundamental for the luxuriant foliage of the branches, so each family, as the essential cell of society, is to be given its due, because the future of humanity passes through the family. The family is the first concrete social reality, yet it is threatened by many factors: domestic violence, the frenetic pace of labor, an individualistic mindset, cutthroat careerism, unemployment, the loneliness and isolation of young people, the abandonment of the elderly and the infirm. The Indigenous peoples have much to teach us about the care and protection of the family. Among them, from an early age, children learn to recognize right from wrong, to be truthful, to share, to correct mistakes, to begin anew, to comfort one another, and to be reconciled. May the wrongs that were endured by the Indigenous peoples serve as a warning to us today, lest concern for the family and its rights be neglected for the sake of greater productivity and individual interests.
Volvamos a la hoja de arce.
Let us return to the maple leaf.
Los soldados la utilizaban
In wartime, soldiers used those leaves for bandages and for soothing wounds. Today, before the senseless folly of war, we have once again need to heal forms of hostility and extremism and to cure the wounds of hatred. A witness of tragic acts of violence in the past recently observed that peace has its own secret, never to hate anyone. If we want to live, we must never hate. We have no need to divide the world into friends and enemies, to create distances, and once again to arm ourselves to the teeth. An arms race and strategies of deterrence will not bring peace and security. We need to ask ourselves not how to pursue wars, but how to stop them, and to prevent entire peoples from once more being held hostage and in the grip of terrible and protracted Cold Wars. What we need are creative and far-sighted policies capable of moving beyond the categories of opposition in order to provide answers to global challenges. In fact, the great challenges of our day, like peace, climate change, the effects of the pandemic and international migration movements, all have one thing in common. They are global. They regard everyone. And since all of them speak of the need to consider the whole, politics cannot remain imprisoned in partisan interests. We need to be able to look, as the Indigenous wisdom tradition teaches, 7 generations ahead, and not to our immediate convenience, to the next elections, or the support of this or that lobby. But we need also to appreciate the yearning of young people for fraternity, justice, and peace. In order to preserve memory and wisdom, we need to listen to the elderly. But in order to press forward towards the future, we also need to embrace the dreams of young people. They deserve a better future than the one we are preparing for them. They deserve to be involved in decisions about the building of the world of today and tomorrow, and particularly about the protection of our common home. In this regard, the values and teachings of the Indigenous peoples are precious. Here, I would like to express appreciation for the praiseworthy commitment being made on the local level to protecting the environment. It could even be said that the symbols drawn from nature, such as the fleur-de-lis in the flag of this province of Quebec, and the maple leaf in that of the country, confirm Canada's ecological vocation. When the Commission for the Creation of the National Flag set about evaluating the thousands of sketches submitted for that purpose, many of them by ordinary people, it proved surprising that almost all of them contained the image of the maple leaf. The convergence around this shared symbol leads me to bring up an essential word for all Canadians: multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is fundamental for the cohesiveness of a society as diverse as the dappled colors of the foliage of the maple trees. With its multiple points and sides, the maple leaf reminds us of a polyhedron. It tells us that you are people capable of inclusion, such that new arrivals can find a place in that multiform unity and make their own original contribution to it. Multiculturalism is a permanent challenge. It involves accepting and embracing all the different elements present. while at the same time respecting their diverse traditions and cultures and never thinking that the process is complete. In this regard, I express my appreciation for the generosity shown in accepting many Ukrainian and Afghan migrants. Yet, there is also a need to move beyond the rhetoric of fear with regard to immigrants and to give them, according to the possibilities of the country, the concrete opportunity to become involved responsibly in society. For this to happen, rights and democracy are indispensable, but it is also necessary to confront the individualistic mindset and to remember that life in common is based on presuppositions that the political system cannot produce on its own. Here, too, the Indigenous culture is of great help in recalling the importance of social values. The Catholic Church, with its universal dimension, its concern for the most vulnerable, its rightful service to human life at every moment of its existence, from conception to natural death, is happy to offer its specific contribution. In these days, I have heard about the many needy persons who come knocking on the doors of the parishes. Even in a country as developed and prosperous as Canada, which pays great attention to social assistance, there are many homeless persons who turn to churches and food banks to receive essential help in meeting their needs, which, lest we forget, are not only material. These brothers and sisters of ours spur us to reflect on the urgent need for efforts to remedy the radical injustice that taints our world, in which the abundance of the gifts of creation is unequally distributed. It is scandalous that the well-being generated by economic development does not benefit all the sectors of society. And it is indeed sad that precisely among the native peoples, we often find many indices of poverty, along with other negative indicators, such as the low percentage of schooling and less than easy access to owning a home and to health care. May the emblem of the maple leaf, which regularly appears on the labels of the country's products, serve as an incentive to everyone to make economic and social decisions that foster participation and care for those in need. It is by working in common accord, hand in hand, that today's pressing challenges must be faced. I thank you for your hospitality, attention and respect, and with great affection, I assure you that Canada and its people are truly close to my heart. Thank you.
Au nom de leurs excellences, je tiens à vous remercier tous pour votre présence aujourd'hui. Pour terminer la cérémonie, les violonistes métis Alicia et Liam Bloor, frères et sœurs de Toronto, nous accompagnent pour le départ de la délégation officielle. On behalf of their excellencies, I want to thank you for attending today's gathering. As the official party departs, they will be accompanied by Métis fiddling duo Alicia and Liam Bloor, siblings from Toronto. Thank you. Merci. Nakromik.
the formal ceremony with the Governor General and the Prime Minister and the Holy Father just ending his remarks. Of course, we're listening to the sounds of fiddles and how important that is to the Métis and many of their celebrations. Now, the Holy Father offering some very insightful words, and I'm sure as we had speculated about what some of the conversations would be about over the course of his conversation with the Prime Minister and with the Governor General, I think he touched on several of these, certainly towards the end of his remarks. He spoke about the importance of protecting life, of taking care of immigrants, of addressing young people who may feel alone, who may feel lost. Many of these social issues, which he did also bring up, I believe, during the Commonwealth Mass, but certainly touching on those, and also saying that the Church has a role to play as well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and he always rooted his own speech in cultural aspect of our Canadian culture, and he made a lot of reference to the maple leaf itself and the way our own symbols. He brought our attention to our own symbols, and I think that's the continuum of what we're seeing. Is like, know who we are. That's what he's saying to every one of us. Like, know your culture, know your history, and then from there, don't stay there. Go forward, and
Yes.
go forward and in dialogue with all of the other people and the other culture that are present into this land. And he made a mention about how multiculturalism is part of our constitution, is part of the constitution of this country, but it's also a challenge that we need to embrace, and we need to face, to know us, to know all the identities present in this culture better, and that's the way we can go forward.
Absolutely, and yes, of course, that emblem, the symbol, the Holy Father referring to the maple leaf throughout, talking about not only the actual maple trees and the beautiful color, and again that can tie in with multiculturalism, but then also talking about the leaf on the flag, and even the use of it by Indigenous people, boiling it and creating this syrup, of course, a much beloved maple syrup, and very much a symbol internationally of Canada. But then even talking about soldiers using it as bandages and kind of tying in the different aspects of the maple leaf. And I think really that's, the Holy Father, again, linking together Indigenous and non-Indigenous, and how everything can kind of fit together and work together and really complement each other.
Yeah, he made also very strong words that I didn't expect. We know that the Pope Francis and Pope Benedict and John Paul II have spoken out against different ideologies, and he spoke about a new colonization that still exists today. There's the ideological colonization, and he made several aspects, and he even mentioned what center a certain mentality that thinks that the certain bad aspect, a dark aspect of our history are not there anymore, and also this. Sometimes we judge the past with the criteria of today, and I think it's a good thing, but at the same time we need that proclivity of trying to get better should not make ourselves sure that we don't have places to improve even today.
Yes.
So I think he made that very specific, and I think we need to take our time to understand what that specifically means for us here in Canada.
Yes, and many themes, certainly on what you're discussing, on multiculturalism. He quoted John Paul II and Familias Consortio, and the future of humanity passes through the family and the importance of the family cells. So a lot of themes really touched on in this. There's a lot to unpack, so to speak. And we remind you that you can always find the Holy Father's homilies, his remarks from different events like this, on our blog, slmedia.org/blog. It's also on our website where you can find the broadcast schedule, slmedia.org, and just look up what's to come. We've got still a full few days of events in Quebec City. Tomorrow we have the Mass de Saint de Beaupré, we have Vespers, so be sure to check our programming guide for the different French and English programs for that. But that's going to do it for us for now. We've had a very full day. Holy Father, of course, arriving in Quebec City, and then this meeting at the Governor General's residence and meeting with the civil authorities and the diplomatic corps at the Citadel. So, Francis, thank you very much for joining us and for assisting with all the translation. It's always very much appreciated. So on behalf of all of us here at Salt and Light Television, thank you for watching. I'm Matthew Harrison, and God bless.